Hello and welcome to another weekly reading vlog. I set myself quite the challenge last week and attempted to read a book a day for the entire week. This week is a little more chill, the stakes are a little lower. Firstly, I started this morning. This is The Lady and the Unicorn by Tracy Chevalier. I absolutely adore Tracy Chevalier. She is one of my favourite authors of all time. I read Girl with a Pearl Earring and absolutely adored it, and then I went to a charity shop and saw literally so many of Chevalier's books and had to buy them all. So this is the last one that I own that I haven't read, and I'm about 55 pages in and I'm loving it so far. The book is about this tapestry which dates back to around the 1500s, and essentially Chevalier completely reimagines the story of how this tapestry came about and the history behind it, and I love that the book has the tapestry. It's really cool, and it's also in the back as well. Like, it shows you the entire thing. This tapestry is immense, and I love reading about art in literature. I love when authors take a piece of art and create an entire story out of it, so these books are right up my alley. Definitely one of my favourite genres to read, so I am loving this so far. The rest of the books that I want to show you aren't books that I need to finish this week. I just want to dip in and out of them throughout the week or just throughout the summer in general. Firstly, I have Lobster by Holly McNeish. This is a book of poetry. I am attempting quite poorly, I will say. I haven't really done it much, but I am trying to read a little bit of this every morning throughout the entire summer. I'm trying to start my mornings by not going on my phone straight away, but it's been really difficult because it's been a really busy week. However, I'm hoping to get into more of a routine and more of a habit of reading this in the morning because it's really good from what I've read so far, and I definitely prefer waking up to reading rather than waking up to my phone. I definitely won't be finishing this week. I am literally that far through it, but I'm hoping to make a little bit more of a dent. The next two books link to another goal that I've set myself for this year, which is to finish all of the books that I'm currently in the middle of. I'm making the conscious effort to go back to these books and try and finish them. Firstly, I have this non-fiction called Invisible Women. I read, I don't even know, like 60 pages, 80 pages of this, but I really struggle with non-fiction, especially when it's quite long. I always find myself yearning for fiction again, hence why I will be reading a fiction alongside of this and dipping into it, reading maybe a chapter or two every single day, because then that gives me the chance to really digest this book and take my time with it. I think books like this are incredibly relevant and incredibly important to read, and I don't want it to just sit on my shelf. The last book that I only got about 100 pages through was Emma by Jane Austen. You will come to know on this channel that I am not the biggest Jane Austen fan, but I have acquired quite a few of her books and I still want to read them because I can't exactly make a full opinion on Jane Austen if I've not read all of her works. I have a lot of opinions towards her based on the novels of hers that I've read so far, which is Pride and Prejudice, which I was really disappointed by after loving the film so much, and Mansfield Park, which is a book that enrages me to my very core and deserves an entire video to itself. I've had Emma for years now. I tried to read it, I couldn't really get into it. I want to like Jane Austen, so fingers crossed I like this. Okay, so that's all my reading plans for this week. I want to take you along with me and I hope you enjoy the video. I'm really struggling to speak right now because it's so hot and stuffy in my room. I can't. Anytime there's a heat wave, I think my brain stops working. I focused my reading on these two books today. I managed to finish part 1 of The Lady and the Unicorn, and I am loving this just like I thought I would. The plot and the characters are messy in the best way. You are instantly transported into this world and it's so easy to picture in your mind. It's just so hot. I can't do it. I can't think straight. I can't create any thoughts. I think that the way that art is described in this book is beautiful as well. I honestly expected nothing less from this author. The one thing that I'm struggling with is one of the main characters who's kind of a love interest with this douchebag painter. He's such an idiot. She's 14 and it's, you know, I know it was normal in the 1500s, like I know it was normal, but it's still really weird to read about. It's also so handy that it's got a picture of the tapestry in it, because when they're describing it you can kind of reference back to it and it just brings the book to life in so many ways. It's honestly incredible. I also managed to read the introduction and chapter 1 of this book. I've already read that before, but this book is so jam-packed full of data and statistics, but that's what I think is so great, is that this author has covered everything. It's not overwhelmingly English or American. She travels across the world and shows how problematic excluding women from our data can be in societies everywhere. She talks about everyone. She honestly doesn't miss a thing, and I love that. This is such a reliable source. I am learning so much from it. Good morning. I am so tired, but I have been reading all of this morning and I've just reached the halfway point of this book and I just love it. I love the characters, there's so much depth to them. This is incredible storytelling. I'm tabbing all of the moments where she describes the tapestry because it's so interesting to see her take on it, because we actually know pretty much nothing about this tapestry, and obviously I don't know anything else apart from what this book is telling me about it. But essentially it's about a woman's seduction of a unicorn, and it also links to all 5 of the senses. So forgive me if I explain this wrong. That was the most atrocious attempt at explaining a tapestry, so I'm gonna do it again, and you're not even gonna see whatever that was. This book doesn't actually show you the whole tapestry. I've tried to look it up online and I can't find the individual pieces. Even on the website at the museum that this is in, it doesn't show you the entire thing. So I wanted to put it on the screen, but I'm just gonna have to show you what I've got and explain from what I can see. Okay, so on the first tapestry there is a battle tent, and it's actually held open by a lion and a unicorn, but funnily, the lion doesn't feature in any of these, even though it features in most of the tapestries in the like real-sized version. My hands are actually so sweaty that the book is breaking. And then it depicts a noble woman taking jewels out of a case. Essentially, this whole tapestry is about the seduction of a unicorn, and it's a noble woman's seduction of this unicorn. So she's trying to dress herself really rich and fancy in this image. And then what is so cool is that the rest of the tapestry is based on the 5 senses. So this one is smell. Yes. So this tapestry is smell. There's a monkey sniffing a flower in the background. As you can see, the unicorn is wearing a coat of arms, and there are flowers and trees, which the trees actually represent each season, and also north, east, south and west. So there's an oak for summer, there's a pine for autumn, there's holly for winter, and there's an orange tree for spring. So that's in the background. So there's the orange tree, so this one is spring and also smell. This one is sound. This one is the noble woman and her lady in waiting, and they're playing an organ. And you can see the unicorn. He's very enticed. He wants it. The next tapestry is taste. This is a different noble woman. She is much younger and she's feeding a parakeet on her hand. And the unicorn has its head turned away, but it wants it. It still wants it, and it's getting a lot closer. Then my favourite one, which is Sight, is the seduction of the unicorn. This is where she finally gets the unicorn in her lap, and she holds up a mirror and he looks at himself to show that the unicorn is vain and cocky, which basically says that men are vain and cocky and fickle when it comes to women's power, which is how I'm interpreting it. So I think that's really cool. And then the last one is touch, and the woman holds the unicorn firmly by the horn. She's in complete control of him. You can see that the unicorn in this one is a lot bigger, and when she seduces him, she makes him a lot smaller. And also in the background, all of the animals are wearing chains to show that they are also chained to love, like the unicorn is. Obviously, this is all interpretation. Tracy Chevalier bases her whole story over what this might mean, what the tapestry could mean, but actually we know nothing about it. So now that I've reached the halfway point and finished that part for the day, I'm going to be focusing more on this book. I want to get maybe 1 or 2 chapters done today. I actually have no plans for the rest of today. I kind of fancy counting all of the books that I have and seeing how many I've read versus how many I haven't read. I also might do some yoga. I'm feeling a bit stiff and incredibly warm again. Okay, I just counted all of my books and I am pleasantly surprised. I have a total of 327 books and I have read 203 of them, which means I have 124 left to read. Hopefully I can read enough so I have under 100 left to read on my shelves, because that would be great. But that's way better than I thought it would be. Incredibly exciting news. I have a microphone, and look how cute and tiny is. I read 2 chapters. In the first one, it talked about public toilets and also public transport. The part on public toilets spoke about the alarmingly high percentage of women who don't have access to a safe public toilet. The chapter that I just finished reading was about maternity and paternity leave, and it was very interesting. Another thing which was really interesting and also devastating to read about was the fact that women spend about 3 to 6 hours on unpaid work outside of their career, whereas men spend between 30 minutes to 3 hours. And how when a woman marries a man, her housework will go up by at least 7 hours a week, which I think is absolutely crazy. I have just finished the chapter on meritocracy, and if you don't know what that is, because I didn't, I had to look it up. It's basically where you judge or hire someone based off of skill and ability, not based off of their looks. Through examples of meritocracy, Perez shows us how not only will a working team be more likely to be diverse if you use meritocracy and hire blind, you're also likely to have a better quality workforce as well. And she speaks about how, unfortunately, women and marginalized groups are more likely to be hired when they are not seen compared to when they are seen in comparison to rich white men. She speaks about the difference between male professors and female professors and how male professors are more likely to be described as brilliant and inspiring and confident and aggressive, whereas women are more likely to be described as kind or welcoming, and they are expected to be warm to their students, but then that means that they're not treated as professionally. But when they act professionally, they are seen as mean. There's actually a really funny quote which I just think is so embarrassing. So I'm going to read it to you, obviously. It says that it says, men of average intelligence think they are more intelligent than 2/3 of people. She speaks a lot about how important visibility is for young children who are just starting off in education, and how when a 5-year-old girl joins education, she doesn't have a brilliance bias. And by the time that she is 6, she will already have this brilliance bias because girls will be in education for a whole year before the lack of representation of women makes girls think that they cannot do things. So Perez says that female students perform better in science when the images in their textbooks include female scientists. She says that in order to stop teaching girls that brilliance doesn't belong to them, we just need to stop misrepresenting women. I think that this chapter was a really interesting comparison between visibility and brilliance bias in children who are just starting off in education and then in women who are working in education. Okay, chapter 5 was definitely the most interesting chapter that I've read so far. Oh my god, there's an ant on my bed. I've got an ant inside. So this chapter talked a lot about the workplace and uniforms and also chemical absorption, which I hadn't even thought about before. But essentially, the effects of chemicals are tested firstly in isolated instances, not prolonged exposure to chemicals, but they're also tested on the default male. The fact that we're not collecting data on this is problematic enough, but also there are so many links with breast cancer and ovarian cancer with chemical exposure, and the link is so clear, and yet data is still not being collected on it. We still don't know exactly what effects it has, even though it's very obvious that these are negative effects, and so women are still facing high exposure to chemicals. Perez also speaks about things like police uniform, military uniform, Coast Guard uniform, and how it's all made to benefit the man. And Perez was speaking about how Coast Guards will have a zip so that when they go on hour-long trips, the men can just whip out and pee, but the women have to fully take off everything. Same with women who are working in really cold countries who wear overalls that have, again, a zip in them so the men can just whip it out, but the women have to take off the whole thing in order to go for a wee, which obviously has its own issues of things like frostbite, anything like that. And obviously police uniform and the bulletproof vests, and all of this is made to tailor a men's comfort and to tailor the stereotypical size of men, not women, which means that not only are women uncomfortable, but they are also unsafe in professions like this and less likely to take up a profession like this because nothing is tailored to fit their needs at all. And as much as so many people will label this as equality and be like, well, we're giving the same uniform to the men and the women, that's not the case, because this equality is based around the default male. Hello, long time no see. It's now Friday, and I know it's been a couple seconds for you, but I feel like I haven't checked in a really long time. I finished this book today, and this was beautiful. This was incredible. I rated it 4.5 stars only because if I read the word plow or maidenhead one more time, I was actually going to combust. And I didn't really like one of the main characters. He was definitely a massive douche, but I think we were supposed to like him. I don't really know. But Apart from that, this was incredible. I loved the complexities of all the characters. Like, none of them are entirely good, entirely moral. They all have their own reasons for things. All of the characters are unhappy in some way. It was actually a really sad, really devastating book. So many of the characters get punished for things that were just normal at the time. And I think that Chevalier constructed such a beautiful story. Absolutely loved how the women's feelings and the women's stories were just brought to life on the tapestry, and you feel like you're reading a fact. Like, I felt like I was reading the true story of the people in this tapestry. I really hope that one day I go to see this tapestry. I could spend hours looking at it. I hope that I do. I want to go see it. It's in France. I can't remember if I said in this video or in another one that I love the depiction of women in art within literature. I'm not sure if I've said that in this video, but that is one of my favorite rabbit holes to go down. I love reading about women in art. This was a perfect example of everything I love about it, because you're reading about women in art and it gives them a story, it gives them a voice, and it's just perfect. I loved it. I'm actually really sad because now I've read all of my Tracy Chevalier books. Like, I don't have any more of hers left. I've read the 4 of hers that I own, and I've got no more. I was struggling to put my thoughts together for this book so much because there's so many facts and I can't summarize it in a good way that also does the book justice and sounds smart enough. So I've had to start writing speeches. So in the first chapter that I read, it speaks about nurses and how that is the profession that has one of the highest rates of violence, and violence is considered a normalcy. Perez speaks about how we could implicate things like shatterproof glass at reception and also a circular walkway instead of loads and loads of corridors, because that leads to higher rates of violence and sexual harassment. They are very expensive things to implicate, but there's also inexpensive things such as putting up posters that say, "We don't tolerate violence here." But Perez also argues that yes, these things will be expensive, but also it will make up for all of the time off that women are taking because of stress, because of injuries from this violence, and so lessen the amount of trained women who will train for 25, 30 years in the nurse's profession and then leave because they just can't do it anymore. They can't handle the violence anymore, so they'll leave and become cleaners or something they are way overqualified for. And then I'm going to read you a quote from the chapter that I just read because I think it sums it up pretty well. It spoke a lot about women cooking on traditional stoves and how that is the equivalent of smoking more than 100 cigarettes a day, and that, according to a 2016 paper in countries from Peru to Nigeria, toxic fumes from stoves are between 20 and 100 times above the World Health Organization guideline limits. And globally, they cause 3 times more deaths every year than malaria, which is crazy because you hear about malaria and how it kills a lot of people. And I feel like it's just kind of something that you just know. People just know that malaria is a big thing. But indoor pollution, I feel like no one really speaks about that much, and it says that worldwide, indoor air pollution is the single largest environmental risk factor for female mortality and the leading killer of children under the age of 5. And then it speaks about using clean stoves and how I think it was Yale published something that said that women just wanted to stick with their really harmful stoves because they just thought that was better, which is ridiculous and untrue. The only reason that women didn't want the clean stoves was because they were ridiculously expensive, and also a lot of their husbands ran the home and didn't think it was necessary to get a new stove to help with the indoor air pollution that was killing their wives' lungs. So that's infuriating that Yale would post something like that, again, blaming women for something that isn't their fault. So infuriating to read about, as always, but still very glad that I'm reading this book. I am learning so much. I am going to wrap up the video now. It's actually Monday. I am going to start a new one. I can't believe I keep starting new ones. The weeks are going so quickly. So I thought I'd give you a little rundown on what I read. I didn't read exactly everything that I wanted to read this week. Okay, so to wrap up, I read one full book. This week I read The Lady and the Unicorn and rated that 4.5 stars. I also read 240 pages of this and I really wanted to finish it, but I didn't. And every time I read this, I get so infuriated, and there's so much rage in me whenever I read this. I've always been quite full of rage at inequality, obviously. But I feel like instead of that rage being unleashed in me, reading this book has kind of infused that into every part of me and my entire being. From the other things that I read since I last updated you, this was speaking about a male based algorithm and how it underrepresents and misrepresents women, which affects careers, language, and medical diagnosis, all very important things. I have kind of gathered from this book is that there can be no equality for men and women if they live their lives similarly and, you know, in the same cars, the same jobs, like both being parents, etc., all of that, because men and women are different, and women being given the same chances as men is full of sexism in, sorry, I'm looking at my speech, is sexist because this is a world designed for men. So this book is kind of about acknowledging these differences through an increase in data collection and then creating a more equal world from that. This is so based around the fact that we have so many data gaps, and it's essentially just pushing the idea that we need to fix them and we need to close those gaps. I have just read the medical bit and how a lack of female inclusion in drug trials like makes you think how many drugs would probably work for women but were stopped at phase 1 of drug trials because they didn't work for men, because there are so many see, look, this is an enlightening thing to speak about, because like how many drugs are there for men that don't work for women. God, the sun is like, yes, keep talking. um, because we are fundamentally different. Our cells are built completely differently, and I think that's such an interesting thing to think about. But I managed to read one book, a bit of this. I read a little bit of Lobster, which is the poetry book that I mentioned at the beginning. It's a very chill book. It's like it's not got as much poetry in it as I thought that it would. It's very chatty. It kind of feels like I'm on a FaceTime with the author, which I really enjoy. I do wish there was a little bit more poetry though. I'm actually going away for the week, so if you want to see what I get up to, then I'll see you in my next one. Thank you so much for coming along for the journey. I have yapped so much this vlog. I've spoken so much about this book. It's really got the cogs turning in my head. So I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one.